Professor Shen, welcome to In Conversation.
Well, it's my great pleasure.
What do you think of President Joe Biden?
He has been a U.S. Senator when he was very young. He has been the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Senate, which is very high-ranked position. And he became the vice president for 8 years, 12 years ago, for President Obama. He has not been a U.S. politician for only last 4 years.
When you say not for 4 years, but 40 years, I take it you're making the comparison to ex-President Donald Trump.
Mr. Biden has been a U.S. leader for last 40 years. He was only not a U.S. leader for the last 4 years. And as a comparison, Mr. Trump was a U.S. leader for only last 4 years. Otherwise, he was never a U.S. politician at any level.
But does that mean that President Biden will be friendlier to China?
Not necessarily. I think everyone would be bound to be friendly to most of the other people. But over time, they can change themselves, transform themselves to be more friendly or less friendly or even hostile. I think at this time, many U.S. politicians in the U.S. Congress on both aisles, on both parties, for either Democrat and Republican, they seem to have increasing amount of difficulty in seeing the rising China, in which they view this China may not suit their value. So I think President Biden may be very much different from Vice President Biden in his eye this year, and comparing with what was 12 years ago or 13 years ago, as China is changing, and he has not changed. He has stayed with his value, his principle, but the world has changed. Americans changed for worse. U.S. cannot handle a pandemic.
Now that President Trump has left, these very large, substantive tariffs that have been put on all kinds of goods from China, are they going to be rolled back under the Biden administration?
I hope so, but I may not expect the trade relationship would improve immediately. And right now, Biden would focus on pandemics, on the public health, on the U.S. economy, how to recover the economy, how to revitalize the U.S. Business, and how to promote the U.S. international leadership. He has a lot to do.
So you're saying that we shouldn't expect to see a significant change in trade relations, at least in the first few months, because he's just so concerned with domestic issues.
He has so many things to busy with, and China is not number one. And over time, he may ask China to do the needful to fulfill China's obligation under the January 15th, 2020's first phase U.S.-China trade and economic agreement.
What about the tech companies? Because there's been a lot of friction with Huawei, and many of the tech companies also that are listed now in the US, they're being told that they must adhere to the accounting practices of the US. They want more transparency and so on. Are we seeing a setup for a confrontation over the technology issues?
With China's rapid rise, the U.S. is increasingly worried about the possibility that China would catch up with the U.S. in the next 10, 15, 20 years. I can understand. America does have its sovereignty and the right not to sell stuff to China and not to buy Chinese products. For a while, China's domestic production of its own 5G chips may not be as highly competent as those Intel and Micron chips. But over time, China overcomes the challenge and China starts to have its own manufacturing with its own competence. With the US pressure, China would have more sense of urgency. China need to sustain its own domestic manufacturing through its own R&D investment. So US could generate a challenge to China, but the US cannot stop China. US would push China to invest more on China's own indigenous research and development.
Are you saying, Professor, that actually China can do without the US, without the US demand, without the US consumer, and that ironically even that perhaps the pandemic has accelerated that looking at China's own market and Chinese companies looking at their own domestic market and wanting to build that up?
China's domestic market is huge. 2 years ago, it was about 7 trillion US dollar. And that's huge. With or without the US market, China could survive, flourish. And without China, US can survive and flourish. But the US would be less better. So why not under Biden administration? The two sides could negotiate. 4 years ago, when Obama ends his presidency, the two countries has more than 200 state-to-state dialogues. 2 years ago, 4 dialogue. Last year, first half 2 dialogue, at the end 0 dialogue. China and US need to work together. So I expect under Biden government, China and US would not return to last year of Obama, but it would not be the last year of Trump. Things would improve. I expect him to be humble, to create an environment in which China would be more interested in partnering with him and with his team in a win-win, mutually beneficial way.
One Chinese commentator in one of the major newspapers actually said that the 2 major issues that there probably is going to be between the US and China will be the South China Sea and Taiwan. Do you think the Biden administration is going to be much more assertive about maintaining their idea of freedom of navigation within the South China Sea, and definitely now coming into conflict with what China argues, where China argues that in fact it has rights over more than 80% of all of the area?
China draws a line which was pretty close to other ring South China Sea countries like Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia. At that time, the national territorial water was basically 3 nautical miles. From 1982, the United Nations made an UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which declared all coastal countries may have some 200 nautical miles as their legitimate economic water, where you can fish, you can take the seabed minerals. Our 200 nautical miles is huge, but per capita, the resource is quite limited. So then we have a need to fish as if such 200 nautical miles were not there. So we went to other 200 nautical miles, understanding we used to fish there. But other countries say, after 1982, you cannot come. We have to arrest you. They caught our people, our fishermen. So lots of problem. Let's negotiate. South China Sea Code of Conduct. No war. We have a lot of dispute for territorial rights, like fishery rights and seabed rights, but no war. China is a big country. China promised not to use war to deal with our neighboring country. I think it's a bigger security assurance.
Yes.
Then they may have less need to ask America and ASEAN to help us, because China promised not to use military means to deal with us.
But so Professor, the other countries are much smaller countries. So a promise by China, which is so much larger and has much, much larger military means, is unilateral in that sense. We must depend on your goodwill not to act in a violent or a warlike manner. And in fairness, China has also argued that it respects the international tribunals, yet a United Nations tribunal court found in favor of the Philippines saying that actually it was an incursion into Philippines' sovereign territory, but China decided that the tribunal had no standing. So there is a bit of confusion. If China says that it is a good international player, then respect the findings of international courts.
Okay, China is for peaceful settlement of the dispute. Honorable State Councilor Wang Yi, our foreign minister, said, South China Sea, we have historical reason to claim. Now, our latest statement is, without abandoning our previous narrative, we also say at this time, South China Sea is a common happy ground of all South China Sea country. It's not mine alone, your alone, it's our collective. And President Xi Jinping has promised that we would not militarize this place. But his government also say when the US increasingly send its military so close to us, we have to deploy something for defensive purpose. Why not all of us sit down and talk? America should not be viewed by China as someone who threats us. And China should not be viewed by our neighboring country and by our American friends as destabilizing this region. So please help us to suggest to Chinese side how China can further help others. And we may have something to say. You can help us, and you may also pressurize China to do things that you don't like China to do.
But what about Taiwan? President Trump took a very early stand on it. He took a call from Madam Tsai Ing-wen. Do you think that President Biden will take a similarly strong point of view on Taiwan?
When China and US normalized their relationship, which was completed on January 1st, 1979, the US promised at least three things. One is severing official relationship with Taiwan. They would only maintain unofficial tie with Taiwan. And they would withdraw all armed force from Taiwan. And the US Taiwan official military airlines should be abolished. But under Trump administration, the White House made many destabilizing and dangerous moves. So never before China-US relationship on Taiwan had been so precarious. So because of US White House and Congress has proposed many policy decisions and many new laws, which almost softened the foundation of China-US relationship.
Do you think we're going?
People are talking about if there will be a war.
You saying that you do think there will be war if this continues?
People are talking about it.
Yes.
I'm saying.
Yes.
But I do say if Taiwan would announce independence.
Of course, but that's a very, very big if, and that's a very big step. On a scale of 1 to 10, how serious would you put the number of the worsening of the relations concerning Taiwan?
If there is an indicator from 0 to 10, with 0 to be very peaceful and 10 to have a war immediately, I think it's about 8.5.
That's very high. That's very, very high.
Very high. US military transporter was flying over Taiwan. US Pentagon's research ship, not a warship, has paid a visit to Taiwan. US Marine were in Taiwan. And the US sent a number of weapons to Taiwan. And Madame Tsai Ing-wen has made very dangerous remarks by saying Taiwan is going to take a critical, crucial decision. This kind of message was very dangerous. So America should not be trapped by the dangerous move she is pushing.
But has China also changed? That it's becoming more nationalistic and that it's moved away from that moderate stand of Deng Xiaoping of saying that if you can't solve a problem now, well, let's leave it to future generations. And that was, of course, also in reference to Taiwan.
Well, China has been a country which has a tradition of more than 2,000 years, which cares a centralized system, unlike the US federal system, that parts of US joined the integral US one by one, They have lots of rights even after joining the US. And China is not. Our emperor, they unified the country by force. And you cannot leave. It's our tradition. It's our culture. And we want to have a final integration, reunification, when both are happy. But if they want to be happy by themselves, and they are so reckless and irresponsible, they want to put China and the US to a war. So finally, no one would be happy. And President George W. Bush used to say, at the peak of anti-terror war, when he received in the White House China's visiting Prime Minister Wen Jiabao, he openly said he is against Taiwan independence. This is a very clear, unambiguous US position. So Taiwanese side need to be very careful. Treasure the time there is a peace, economic integration, and politically mutual tolerance. Without American intervention, the outcome is clear. It's unification with whatever means, hopefully peaceful means. With American intervention, it can be more complicated, but the outcome will have no change.
What do you think is going to happen between President Xi Jinping and President Biden? Will their personalities match together better?
I think President Biden is renowned for his moderateness and his entire cabinet. Many of them were known for their moderate temperament. Biden came to China when he was vice president. He met with the then vice president of China, Xi Jinping, and they met in Beijing, they went in Chengdu. So Biden knows China quite a lot. He may not like China on every issue, but certainly he knows China, I would say, almost on every issue. China is complicated. China has a long history. Unlike the US has only history 245 years, China has a history of unified country for some 2,000 years. So respect China. For Biden would look to China in this humble way, showing his greatness, showing his humbleness and humility. I'm sure he would invite reciprocity from my president and my president colleagues to present Chinese traditional style of politeness and our respect to the US new president.
With the US being more concerned possibly with its own domestic issues, some commentators are saying that this opens up a vacuum of power where China can step in. Do you agree?
Well, China is big. China has gigantic number of people. When I was 18 years old in 1979, China's per capita GDP was $200 US. And then 20 years later, in the new millennium, in the year 2000, China's per capita GDP became 4 times bigger, $800 US. But 2 years ago, 2019, we met 10,000 US. So for a centralized government, it has a huge resource and competence. And with a mixed system, state management and market economy, China has its unique competence. For this, US need to be careful. But meantime, China need to be humble. So not a time to think we can replace America or we ought to replace America. Let our performance to tell, not to say awesome China, to say humble China. So don't take the advantage. US has lots of domestic challenges, so China can do something. China needs to extend its hand to America, genuinely, our heart opening for America, because America helped us for so many years in the past. When two countries are not arrogant, each is humble, then the entire world, the Pacific area, would be more peaceful and calm.
And we in Asia, we should not be afraid of a rising China?
Yes, but this is not taken for granted. We should behave in a way as a would be clearly able to understand China, and they would not misunderstand China. So China can use bilateral talk, multilateral talk. China may also listen to our friend or our competitor in terms of mediation and arbitration, and others could sue China, and China can sue them. Don't take a sue as an offense, we need to be angry. Then China may be viewed as ground to be mature.
Prof. Shen, thank you very much for being on In Conversation.
Thank you very much for rendering me this great opportunity. Thank you.